Hi everyone, Queveen here from the comfort of my kitchen. In today's video, we are going to be taking a closer look at the planet Mars. So we will be looking ahead into March. We will look far ahead of March as well. If you've been following along with my videos recently, you should have seen some videos about how different things look better in different places, and that includes our view of Mars and indeed Venus. You can see here as we zoom in very closely on the 1st of March that Venus and Mars are up in the sky. If we bring ourselves even earlier in the morning, when it's a little bit darker, Mars will be easier to see, but more than likely still invisible if you are in a city with light pollution or if you are further north than we are here in Ireland. So in a previous video, we discussed how our distance from the equator influences the angle at which we see the planets. If you're closer to the equator, you will see Mars and Venus rising into the sky almost directly above the sun rather than at this steep angle, which of course makes them much harder to see. Now that we've pushed out into the countryside, Mars is just about visible as a little dot to the naked eye if you have nothing in your way. But of course, as it rises higher in the sky and as Venus becomes visible, Mars will all but disappear. When we're seeing Mars like this early in the morning, we're seeing it almost on the far side of the sun. Of course, if Mars was on the far side of the sun, we wouldn't see it at all. It would be directly behind the sun and blocked from view. But if we take a look here, even though it's not exactly behind the sun, it is pretty close. Mars looks almost full. If we get rid of the atmosphere, dispersing that orangey glow of sunrise, then it becomes a little bit easier to see. We can see Mars is almost a full Mars, and we can see its two moons, Phobos and Deimos, there as well. Now, we're going to push into the future. Even if we just push forward by a few hours or a few minutes, we'll see Mars rotating. Mars rotates at almost the same speed as the Earth, a little bit slower, and that's really a good thing. Mars rotating a little bit slower than the Earth. That means if you go out on the same time every night for a few nights in a row, Mars will be after rotating a little less than the Earth. So we'll be going back out with the Earth after rotating the same amount, 24 hours. It'll be after coming all the way back around to pointing the same direction. Whereas Mars won't quite be after coming the whole way around. So we'll be able to see a little bit more of Mars each time we go out because Mars will be after turning around and bringing that portion of the planet into view. Now, of course, this is all going to be incredibly difficult. Even if I push us all the way up to the end of March, here we go, we'll bring back up the atmosphere and definitely quite a lot of sunlight there. Of course, as we get later into March, the sun will appear to rise earlier and earlier. Our days are going to get shorter. We can still see, even though the angle is changing, Mars is still coming up over the horizon at a very shallow angle. There we go. So there's Mars. We're definitely still in the countryside. Plenty of stars visible there as the sun is rising, but Mars is practically invisible to the naked eye. Even though we are getting later in the year, Mars is pushing out further away from the sun. The sunrise is also getting earlier and earlier. All of that will contribute to making Mars pretty difficult to see really for a few months to come. If we keep pushing into the future here, we can see that Mars looks much higher in the sky, much further from the sun. You will just have to trust me that Mars is in fact in there. If we push back into morning time, now Mars is looking pretty visible and Saturn has completely overtaken it. So we're only a couple of months into the future here and Saturn has appeared to move further in the sky than Mars. Now what's really happening here is that the Earth is going around the sun and these planets are going around the sun. Mars is going around the sun at almost the same speed as we are. So it's almost moving away from us as we move around the sun at this time of the year. It's going to appear to move more slowly in the sky than planets like Saturn. Saturn is orbiting the sun quite slowly, but it's after moving drastically in our sky because the Earth is after moving quite a good distance around the sun. We'll keep pushing forward and we'll see that Mars continues to look further away from the sun, but the sunrise is also coming earlier and earlier. We can see there a fantastic view of the sky as we get into summertime this year. We've got Jupiter, Mars, the Moon, Saturn all in a row. That's going to look lovely. We'll keep pushing forwards, and we can see Jupiter there overtaking Mars, appearing further from the sun than Mars is. And again, this is down to Mars's orbit around the sun and our orbit around the sun, both working together. Jupiter and Saturn appear to move across our sky mostly because of our movement, whereas Mars, moving that much faster than the more distant planets, its movement has a greater effect on how it appears to us. So as we keep pushing through this year, Saturn will pop up in the morning, it'll come to opposition, it will look brilliant in the middle of the night. Jupiter will move out and it will come to opposition, it will look brilliant in the middle of the night. But we can see here, Mars is only starting to reach the south at 3 o'clock, half 3 in the morning by the time we're through to December. And a planet will be at opposition when it's directly above the south in the middle of the night, on the opposite side of the Earth to the sun. So if we take a close look at Mars here, and I will move us back a little bit to exaggerate this effect, well, I think it should be clear that we're not looking at a full Mars. It's definitely a little bit shaded there on one side. That effect should be more drastic if we move even further backwards. Here we go. When we see Mars pretty much 90 degrees from the sun, what would be the greatest elongation for planets like Mercury and Venus, we're still not exactly going to see a half Mars. Mars is further from the sun than us, so we'll never see it at exactly a half. But we can see there, looking pretty far away from us, there's definitely a good portion of Mars shaded in. When Mars is directly behind the sun, and if we keep pushing backwards here, I'll get rid of the ground and the atmosphere to make this a little bit easier to track. We can see that Mars, as it gets further away from us, going around the back of the sun, it gets closer to looking full. It looks more like a full circle, and we're already coming back to March here. If we push forward, Mars will come closer to us because our orbit and Mars's orbit, once we've caught up with Mars and Mars is in opposition, that'll be the closest together that we're going to get. We can see here Mars is slowly getting more and more full looking as it's getting closer and closer to us. And just about here, here is Mars, almost 100% full. We'll push a little bit further. There we go. So Mars at about 100% full. It's about 96,000 or 96 million kilometers away from us. Let's see if we can make that number smaller. It looks to be at its smallest there at almost exactly 96 million. Yeah, it goes up on either side. So here we are. This is Mars at its closest to us, looking at its fullest. And this is in January 2025. So we're not going to see Mars at opposition at all this year. And that's partly because of how our orbit and Mars's orbit, they're quite close together, and for that reason they're quite similar speeds. Mars is just a little further from the sun, so it's a little bit slower, and that can make things, some particularly interesting things happen. In fact, something particularly interesting will happen while Mars is at opposition. So just before we finish up with this look at Mars, we will of course have more looks at Mars in the future, certainly once it becomes more prominent in our sky. There we go. Once Mars becomes more prominent in our sky, we will take another look at it. I don't know if this particular view of the orbits makes it obvious, but we'll see it happen at any rate. We can see a couple of bright stars there around Mars, and as we move through time, we'll see Mars appear to change direction. So that's moving backwards. We'll go forwards instead. There's Mars changing direction as we go through the end of 2024 and into 2025. So this is something we've looked at when we looked at retrograde motion of the planets a few videos ago, a good few videos ago now, but this is something that appears to happen with the orbit of Mars. And again, it is because we are all moving. It's not just Mars that's shifting around in the sky. We'll come all the way back to today's date, or at least back into February this year. While we do, we can take a closer look at Mars as it runs through its orbit here. We will get to see different parts of Mars as this happens, and different poles of Mars as well. So we're looking at the South Pole there, which must be in summer, facing towards the sun. The ice cap's pretty small. You might be able to tell that the ice cap there seems to be growing as the South Pole moves back into the autumn time and into winter time for the South Pole of Mars. We can see the North Pole there starting to come around with quite a small ice cap as it's coming into summer, so the ice cap will shrink. So that we're all the way back into last year now, so I can start bringing us forward again. This is how Mars would look, rotating just like any other planet. Mars is tilted in a similar way to the Earth, so it does have seasons. It has a summer and a winter and an autumn and a spring, whereas other planets can be a lot less seasonal because they don't have as much of a tilt. So this growing and shrinking of the ice caps on Mars is happening for the same reason we have our seasonal growth and shrinkage of the ice caps. Now, at 3 o'clock in the morning, Mars would certainly be under the horizon, so let's bring it up to about 6-ish, and we will get rid of all of this extra information from the sky. So here we go, zooming back out. About 6 in the morning, there's Venus, there's Saturn, and down there is the Sun and the Moon, very close to the new moon there in early March. We'll bring back the ground, we'll bring back the atmosphere, and Mars is invisible once again. So Mars will be there above the horizon for the early part of March, but it will be barely visible. It will get easier and easier to see as we move into the future, but we will be waiting until 2025 before Mars reaches its best position for observation. So I hope you enjoyed this quick look at the motion of the red planet. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to like it. And if you enjoy this kind of content, please do subscribe to my YouTube channel. You can also check out Queebean's content on Instagram and queebeanscontent.ie, where you can read a little bit about the information that I've given here. So thank you for watching, and I hope you'll join me next time.